You're on.
Good afternoon or early evening. Thank you for joining us at the City of Las Cruces. On behalf of the City of Las Cruces and the Las Cruces Police Department, we welcome you and thank you for being here. It's a very important topic, obviously, and we're proud to hold this town hall to receive, to share information and to receive feedback. There is a sign-up sheet at the back. If anybody has not yet signed it, please feel free to do so. You don't have to, but if you want to. There's also a space in there for contact information. You can either leave an email address or a phone number, and if you want us to get a hold of you for any reason, please put a little star there next to that. I've already mentioned the cell phones. If you haven't already, turn them off. Also, after our 4 speakers, we will have limited time for questions. Unfortunately, we're only going to be able to take questions, so I'm going to ask at the end that we take questions in like 10 or 20-second questions. We don't have time for commentary, unfortunately, at this time. But our phones are always available if you ever need to leave some type of commentary for us, or if you want to speak to us further. Also, there's a good chance that all of our speakers will be available after tonight's presentation. They'll be down here, and you can come down and ask them questions on your own. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our Chief of Police, Jeremy Story.
Good evening. The turnout is awesome. I really appreciate everybody that's here. It's going to be a little bit different than our other ones. We try to change it up every time to keep you guys guessing. So we are going to present a lot of information. We're going to try to get through it as quickly as we can. It's a good thing it's recorded, so if you want to go back, pause the YouTube video on a slide to look at it further. But I want to give some information at the end. We're going to have some question time, and then at the very end, we'll stick around so we can have some one-on-one time. I have some of our community outreach officers here as well, so there's lots of people you can grab if you have a specific issue or incident you want to talk about, or your question. We weren't able to answer your question during the presentation time. We're going to go over a few different topics that are all related to crime reduction. They're all woven together. The first is just general crime reduction, evidence-based policing strategies. We're going to talk about our real-time crime center, give us some more information on that. We're going to talk about some issues we've seen in the system itself, the criminal justice system. And then I'll end on talking about the ordinances we have coming up, summarizing those, and some of the things we have hopefully coming very soon with our municipal court. So without further ado, I want to introduce my Deputy Chief of Operations, Eric Udenda, who, instead of hearing me talk all the time, I'm going to have DC Udenda talk about the things that are happening on the operations side. DC.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and start off by just giving you several numbers, a few data in reference to what has been going on within the city of Las Cruces for the past 5 years. First and foremost, we'll start off with 2019. In 2019, we saw a little over 4,000 cases of violent and property crimes in Las Cruces. Compare that to 2018, there was no significant change. But as we move forward, 2020, we did see a significant increase of 24% in violent and property crime. We continue on through the years. 2021, it increased by 6%, and in 2022, it increased again by double digits of 23%. However, in 2023, we did see, for the first time in 5 years, a decrease in violent and property crime, a reduction of 4%. Currently, year-to-date for the first quarter in 2024, we're at 1,439 cases of violent and property crime, which represents about 5% decrease in violent and property crimes, which this is good, and if we continue on this trend for this year, we'll see another reduction in crime for 2024. However, just like in 2023, we are not satisfied and we're not content, not with the 2023 4% decrease, or even this year at 5% decrease. The mission of the Las Cruces Police Department is to provide community-focused public safety and law enforcement services to our area residents, businesses, and visitors so that you can live and thrive in a safe and peaceful environment. That is our goal, and our goal is to do just that by hopefully bringing these decrease in percentage of violent and property crimes to double digits, for hopefully 10% or higher. I'm going to break it down just a little bit further in reference to the numbers I just gave you, but focus only on 2024 year to date. Violent crime itself for murder. In 2023, we had 2. 2024, we had 3, which represented a 50% increase. The crime of rape, there was no change. Robbery, we had a 10% decrease in incidents of robbery. And aggravated assaults, we did have an increase from 72 in 2023 to 135 in 2024, which represents an 80% increase. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in my presentation. Overall, in violent crime year to date, it has increased by 58%. We're going to proceed on to break down year-to-date 2024 property crimes. Residential burglary saw a significant decrease of 28% from 86 in 2023 to 62 in 2024. Commercial burglary had a 1% decrease. Non-residential burglary had a 52% decrease. And B&E, or breaking and entering, had a decrease of 33%. Auto burglary itself also had a significant decrease from 361 in 2023 to 219 this year in 2024. As we continue with property crime, we proceed forward to felony thefts, which did see a significant increase of 142%. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well later on in my presentation. Misdemeanor theft saw a decrease of 14%. Misdemeanor shoplifting, however, also saw an increase of 24%. Vehicle theft saw a decrease of 33%, and arson had a decrease of 50%. Overall property crime year to date for 2024 did decrease by 9%. So what changed? You might be asking yourself that question. First and foremost, Chief Story became our Deputy Chief of Operations in October of 2022. Later on, in July of 2023, he became our interim chief and our permanent chief as of December of 2023. As soon as he became the Deputy Chief of Operations, he introduced the concept of evidence-based, intelligence-led policing approach to prevent crime. This is what resulted in the first decrease in property crime and violent crime that we have seen in the city of Las Cruces since 2018, which was the 4% decrease we talked about on the previous slides. And it has also resulted, year-to-date for 2024, in a decrease of 5% of overall violent and property crime. Evidence-based, intelligence-led crime prevention, what exactly is it? It redirects law enforcement efforts to crime reduction variables that we can impact more significantly, such as crime prevention, educating the public, and improving relationships with citizens and businesses. Basically, traditional policing, the concept of let's go out there and make arrests alone is not enough. They're important because they bring justice to the victims of these crimes. However, we cannot arrest our way out of the problem. And I'm going to explain that a little bit to you in the next slide when I represent what is called a crime funnel. What is a crime funnel? Simple method to display the likelihood of commission of a crime that will result in incarceration. Serving has established various crime funnels. This is one example of those crime funnels. The key takeaway for this crime funnel and any that you may look up online is that on average, for every 1,000 crimes, only about 15 individuals are incarcerated. So if you look at this diagram in front of you, the top of the crime funnel represents the crimes that are being committed, both violent and property crimes. On average, we have about 1,000. From there, we move on down the funnel towards the actual number of crimes that are reported or known to the police. Now, why does it drop from 1,000 to 530? There's several variables that are in between there, but it can be from as little as the public does not want to report them. Maybe they feel that whatever crime they were a victim of is not as relevant, or they can live without having to report it. Whatever reason it may be, the number drops drastically. From those 530 known crimes to the police, we continue down the funnel, down to the actual number of arrests. In this funnel, we see that there's an average of 100 arrests out of those 1,000 crimes. Now, this, again, there's a lot of variables from 530 down to 100. That can be, once again, is there a victim being cooperative, meaning do they want or do they feel it's important enough to report the crime? Or it can be other variables such as, is the suspect known? Is there enough evidence to proceed? And so forth. A lot of variables in between. As we go on from the point of arrest, which is at 100, down to the bottom of the funnel, which represents the total number of people that are incarcerated, it's 15. And there you see the judicial process. There's the pre-trials, trials, and so forth, everything from the point of arrest all the way down to the bottom. And that, again, can drop the number significantly, on average, down to 15 actually sentenced to prison with the possibility of 20 felony convictions because of some kind of agreement at the point of conviction. This basically represents why, what I mentioned earlier, we cannot arrest our way out of the problem. Instead, focusing closer to the top of the funnel will generate a better return on our investments of time and resources. Crime prevention sits at the top of the funnel, maximizing the impact of our work, and it's been evident or clear, at least when you see the trend with the Las Cruces Police Department and the City of Las Cruces with the decrease in crime last year and the decrease thus far this year for 2024. When we combine with the detection of crimes, arrests, and prosecutions, along with the educating the public and community involvement, these efforts result in a reduction of crime and overall improved quality of life for our community. How are we preventing crime? Identifying hotspots throughout the city and increasing our attention in those areas. What exactly are hotspots? Hotspots are specific places. They can be a building, they can be intersection or areas of the city where crime is higher when it's relative to the surrounding areas or other parts of the city. Research has demonstrated that hotspot policing can be effective in crime as a crime reduction strategy. I'm gonna go over a couple of projects that we've initiated that it's based on hotspots and, again, evidence-based, intelligence-led policing. In January 2023, from January 2023 to March 2023, we initiated a hotspots project addressing stolen vehicles. Intel and data showed a significant increase of thefts. From 2021, we had 595. 2022, we had 939 vehicle thefts. That was an increase of about 58%. Intel and data was used to determine hotspots for auto thefts. We combined patrol efforts with community outreach, with our K-9, with our street crimes unit, and patrol to identify those hotspots and focus our attention on those hotspots. In addition, we also provided community flyers to the public, and the community outreach assisted us in setting up tents in the identified hotspots to provide an opportunity for the people affected in those areas to be able to come up to us, share any intelligence problems they may be having in that area so that we can address those issues at that time. The flyers contain information to the public on how they can do their part in ways to reduce the crime that was occurring in those areas. For instance, a lot of our auto burglaries were occurring as a result of vehicles being left unlocked, and that's some of the big message that we try to relay to the public when we're having these events. Little things that can be done by everybody involved. The results of this hotspot project did result in a reduction of auto thefts by 11%. The next hotspot project ran concurrently with the one previously, but it started a month afterwards in February of 2023, and it went through March of 2023. This was a joint hotspot project with New Mexico State Police, where intel and data was used to determine, this time, hotspots that focused on these following crimes: violent crimes, burglaries, and auto thefts. It involved from LCPD, patrol officers, K-9, Metro Narcotics, and our street crimes unit. New Mexico State Police came down and supported our efforts by offering several patrol officers, their fugitive apprehension team, the investigation bureau, and Metro Narcotics section for New Mexico State Police. The project addressed the identified hotspots and also included an offender-focused team and a stolen vehicle team. The results of this project: violent crime was reduced by 44%, numerous arrests and recovery of significant amount of property to include drugs, weapons, and stolen vehicles. Another project that was ran and is currently being ran is our rolling 60-day heat map. This started in February 2023 and is ongoing to this very day. It is a hotspot that's focused on GIS maps, and that was created by our Intel unit. Intel and data is gathered by our Intel unit and is used to create a GIS, or a Geographical Information System map, that provides the visual of hotspots throughout the city, and the map is periodically updated by our Intel unit so that our officers out on the field have up-to-date information on what areas within the city are being affected. Officers can access and utilize these maps to focus on specific crimes in those areas based on their duty day hours when they are working. Officers are encouraged to patrol these areas throughout the day whenever possible. If I was an officer that utilizing the 60-day heat map, for example, I can be in my assigned district for the day. If I don't have no calls pending and no one else needs my assistance, I can utilize the downtime that I have at that point to access this GIS map, find out the relevant problem areas in my district itself, and then spend more time in those areas. The identified hotspots are also noted by the patrol lieutenants in their rosters, just in case the electronics go down, which tends to happen sometimes, or as an easier reference for our officers who get a patrol roster at the beginning of their shift. They can refer back to the patrol roster and look up where the hotspots are at. The lieutenants for patrol at that point identify at least one property crime and one violent crime on the rosters. They note it on there, and the officers know that they don't have access to the 60-day rolling map to look up the rosters and spend some more time in those hotspots. Here you see an example of the GIS 60-day rolling map. This map, what you see before you, is a filter to include assaults, burglaries, and vehicle thefts in a small area of the city. But it can be modified if our data is saying that we currently have what you saw earlier, an increase in aggravated assaults. Our patrol officers can filter this map so that it generates this report based on only aggravated assaults so that they know what areas of the city to spend most of their time with. This map specifically is filtered to include only day shift hour crimes from 0630 to 1600 hours, or 6:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The darker areas in the hotspot indicate incidents that are more clustered together. For example, in this map that you see, 855 East University and 1150 Milton have had a significant amount of incidents in regards to assaults, burglaries, and vehicle thefts. Another project that we ran and currently running and started this month is a DA warrant roundup project. Grant funding was provided to LCPD to serve numerous felony warrants throughout the city. Grant funds were used by LCPD Intel, CID, our patrol officers, and K-9 officers to assist in reviewing over 200 outstanding felony warrants within the city. About 70 or so warrants were confirmed to actually still be living in the city and are currently being investigated by those sections. As of 2 days ago, on April 23rd, over 30 of these warrants have been closed out by arrest or other, meaning officers have identified that these individuals have either been already incarcerated on other crimes or potentially moved out of the city. However, it has resulted in the arrest of the removal of 30 individuals that had felonies that resided within the city. And this will be ongoing through June. Another project that will be starting next week from April 27th through June 18th is a hotspot joint project with New Mexico State Police. And for this one, intel and data was used to determine hotspots in the city affected most by assaults, burglaries, and vehicle thefts. This will involve LCPD and New Mexico State Police officers, and the project will target the identified hotspots and focus on crime prevention and deterrence by providing high visibility in those areas, essentially preventing crime. Despite the positive reviews so far, we're not content for several reasons, 3 of them specifically up here on the board for you. First and foremost, our year-to-date aggravated assaults, as I mentioned earlier, for 2024, at 135 compared to 72 in 2023, do demonstrate an 88% increase in aggravated assaults. Also, our year-to-date felony thefts in 2024 compared to 2023 went from 71 to 172, which represents a 142% increase. And then, of course, our year-to-date misdemeanor shoplifting, 2024, 436, from 2023, 352, which represented a 24% increase. As we continue to compile data, our approach will be directed towards the current crime trends. Crime is rapidly changing. Just like we change our tactics, the criminals, the individuals committing these crimes are also changing their tactics. And as we identify or focus on property crime, violent crime may potentially increase as well. We have to be evolving, rapidly changing. And for those reasons, the same evidence-based, intelligence-led policing approach that Chief Story brought to our department is very useful and helpful because we know now what our next step is. Our projects, the last 2 projects I discussed, to include a DA warrant roundup and the joint project with New Mexico State Police, will address the aggravated assaults that you saw in that previous slides that have increased. In addition to that, our community outreach section and patrol has been utilizing the same intel to address alarming increase in thefts that you saw on the previous slide. Community outreach has also taken the lead in working with local businesses on the retail theft that you saw, and there will be an implementation of a real-time crime center, the RTCC, here in the near future. Lieutenant Bradley will speak about that here shortly. The key takeaway from my presentation is we have to continue our efforts by working with citizens and businesses throughout the city of Las Cruces. We do have 190 officers out on the street, but that's not compared to the over 100,000 citizens and pairs of eyes that are out there that can help us reduce this crime and make our city better, safer, and a better place to live for everybody. Thank you very much for your time. I will turn it over at this point to Lieutenant Peter Bradley from our Criminal Investigations Division.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Bradley with the Criminal Investigations Division. I was asked before I start to let you guys know if you're standing in the back, there are a couple of seats up in the front where you guys can sit down. What I was asked to discuss today is the implementation of our Real-Time Crime Center and what it is that we are planning to do. So first and foremost, what is a Real-Time Crime Center? The mission of Real-Time Crime Center is basically to fuse new technologies and capabilities so that law enforcement can take advantage of them. The Bureau of Justice definition is behind me. I'm not going to actually read it to you guys, but that's the idea of what we're looking at doing. When we talk about new technologies, law enforcement historically is always on the back foot. We are never following up with these new things. We're always behind the times. We're looking at trying to change that within our TCC and move to some of the cutting-edge technology that's available. Integrating dispatch systems and record management systems, live video camera feeds, automated license plate readers, and real-time locations of both our officers and their vehicles to give us an idea of what's actually happening within our city, all of our city, at any time. If you guys look at the graphic that's there, that's an example of what that overlay would look like. So the next thing I want to talk about is how the RTCC affects our community, or how it would help our community. The people that have known me for a long time know I like to tell stories and I talk with my hands, so you'll probably get a little of both. First and foremost is officer safety. While doing a tour in Albuquerque, I went to their real-time crime center, and while I was there, I watched them work. A call was dispatched for a domestic. In that domestic, it was a neighbor calling in at an apartment complex. They didn't know anything about the people that lived next door, but they knew it sounded bad and it sounded violent. Generally speaking, a law enforcement response to something like that would be sending 2 officers. Well, when that call hit the real-time crime center, they started researching. And they found out that the people that live in that apartment have a history of domestic violence, not only against each other, but against other partners. They also have a history of violence towards the police officers that respond to those calls. And what they did is they went ahead and contacted that field supervisor, asked them to respond, and sent a 3rd unit so that officers had an idea of what they were getting into before they got there, other than just a very vague, it sounds like it might be bad in this apartment. The next story I want to tell you is about assisting our vulnerable population. So up north in Farmington, there was a juvenile who had left school. He wanted to commit suicide. They didn't know where this kid was. They used their real-time crime center, and they were able to see him leaving school, and then they were able to use those real cameras and those live feeds and recorded feeds to figure out where he went. They tracked him all the way to an abandoned building where this young man had entered and was attempting to kill himself. They were able to get the officers to that location, and they were able to save that individual's life just by implementing something like this. Crime reduction and resource allocation is the next way it helps our community. Deputy Chief Orenda discussed how we're using hotspots, how we're trying to use intelligence-based policing to better serve our community. And this gives us that much more. It allows us to not only do 60-day rolling heat maps, but to give us information in real time. As that call comes in, that map automatically adjusts itself so that officers know not 60 days, not 10 days prior, they know at that minute where hotspots have been. They know what's happening, and they understand where we need to put those resources. We have that ability to see where our officers are, see where those cars are, and we can make sure that they are in those areas that they need to be, and if that's having an effect or if we need to adjust what we're doing. Investigations is another one, and this is actually a local story. Officers responded to a call of a gunshot victim in a car. They get there, and this poor kid can only say that somebody tried to carjack him, and they were in a black Challenger. They couldn't give any other information to those officers. The detectives went out. They worked at all they could that night canvassing local businesses, and they couldn't get anything. Going through automatic license plate readers and searching for vehicles, they were able to find a black Challenger that had been in that area that night. Reaching out to our street crimes and other sources, we were able to find that that black Challenger had actually, in fact, been involved in a lot of other crimes. We were able to locate that vehicle with an investigative lead that we were brought through our database. And then with that investigative lead, they were able to pursue it. They found that vehicle. They were able to do a search warrant on that vehicle. We were able to recover the weapons involved that injured this kid. The next thing that we have is transparency. I think all of us believe that transparency is an important thing, especially with law enforcement. What the Real-Time Crime Center allows us to do is that up-to-date real-time information we're providing to citizens, we can also provide to on transparency page. Of course, certain things will be restricted. We're not going to put people's information, but to give an idea of what calls are in areas, what's happening in certain areas. Those are things that we can give to the community in real time and allow them to have a better understanding of what their law enforcement is doing in those areas. RTCC concerns. I'm pretty sure this will hit, everybody here will get at least one of these references. It's a very, very reasonable concern. That's one of the reasons we're out here talking about it. Everybody, you know, the idea of keeping data of automatic license plate readers, of cameras that are pumping into places, it makes everybody uneasy. And I understand that completely. So how do we address these concerns? Well, it's simple. The first way is transparency. That's with our community leaders, that's with our city council, and that's with you, the public. It's why when Chief Story wanted to stand this up and was working on doing this, we brought it immediately to everyone's attention. It's why I'm here talking to you about it now. We don't want the community to have any misconceptions about what it is that we're doing and what it is we're not doing. The next way we do it is we limit access. We limit it to approved and trained personnel, and that's all that we do it. We don't allow anybody to do this, and we don't allow anybody to search for any reason. We internally audit ourselves and make sure that on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, that this is being used the way it's supposed to be used. We conform to policies informed by best practices. We are not the first real-time crime center. We're not even the first in New Mexico. We have so many people that blaze that trail ahead of us that we can get those best practices from them, and we can figure out what the best way to move forward with is. Those annual reports that come out of audits, those will be available to the public. Those are not things that we're gonna hide. If you guys wanna know how many cases we ran through the Real-Time Crime Center, that'll be an available number. And lastly is a data retention period. We are not pumping these things into the cloud to be stored indefinitely. Most real-time crime centers operate on about a 7 to a 30-day window depending on what settings and how they want to operate. And those are things that we are looking at implementing as well, so that we are not just holding data forever. This is a Lift Up Las Cruces survey. You heard Deputy Chief Orenda talk about hotspots. Now it's important to note that the lift up areas here are not just hotspots, but there are hotspots in these lift up areas. And number 3 on that list is adding surveillance from the police to reduce crime. The next one on the right is a visible police presence. We're looking at doing both of these with the Real-Time Crime Center. We're not looking at hiding cameras or anything. We're looking at putting bright things that are out that show people the police are watching. We're here, we're trying to pay attention to these areas, and we're trying to help these communities. Lastly, for you guys to see is what our vision is. Our vision for the Real-Time Crime Center is what you're seeing right here. Eventually, yes, we want to move, we want to go regional, we want to help the entire county. But for right now, with the city, this is a modest start of what we can do. We can set up a room rather, and as you can see, there's space for 2 operators and a supervisor to work from, for them to monitor those calls for service, for them to see what's happening, for them to do the research, provide that information to those patrol officers as they're responding, to assist those investigators where they might be able to find that information beforehand, and to help get these reports and pushed out to the public so that you guys have a better and more accurate idea of what's happening within your own city. Next will be Mr. Byers, the district attorney. He's going to talk to you guys about the challenges in our criminal justice system.
Thank you, Lieutenant Bradley. And as he said, my name's Gerald Byers, District Attorney, and I wanted to thank LCPD for the opportunity to speak to you this evening, as it will give you an insight into what our office is doing and what are some of the challenges that we face as we are engaged in the issues of maintaining justice and public safety. First of all, I just wanted to share with you that justice cannot exist without the truth. Our mission is to support the men and women of law enforcement and bring justice to those victims. That relies essentially on the truth. No fabrication, no obfuscation. That's why I wanted to share with you the concepts of how it is that our criminal justice structure came to be. So if you'll bear with me for a little bit, we'll take you through this, how we got here. Back in May of 2020, because of COVID, all of the jury trials were suspended. Now, keep in mind, there was a backlog of cases before that, but whenever COVID hit, it adversely affected the way that the courts can do business. They had to put in place rules that kept people at least 6 feet away from one another. Imagine doing a jury trial with those types of situations, and also having victims come in and things of that nature. Now, back in March 30th of 2023, the Supreme Court lifted the COVID requirements and things commenced. And then we go to grand juries. Now, just to explain the process, before a person can be officially formally charged, there has to be a determination of probable cause. That probable cause determination is either done by a judge by way of preliminary hearing for felonies, or by a grand jury, a group of people such as yourself, and they receive information from the prosecutor's office. And we're not prosecutors at that time, we're aides to the grand jury. We're neutral. We must be neutral. We cannot advocate for a person to be indicted or like that. Limited to 1 day per week. Think about it. 1 day per week, we've got a backlog, cases are ongoing. Courts came under scrutiny from the New Mexico legislature, focusing on crime and pretrial release. And it said the court clarified the analysis that district courts should follow in determining whether legal requirements have been met, utilizing words, holistic common sense approach. But the issue was pretrial release, and that issue has been resonating with the residents of New Mexico for some time. Let's go back to how this all began. Bail reform. Everybody remembers it. Most folks who were here then, there was an amendment put before the voters, and they voted on it under the premise that it would give judges the authority to hold people in custody who were dangerous, violent criminals. What happened in reality was that whenever the Court Rules Committee put out the rules that the judges were to follow, instead of keeping the dangerous people in, what resulted was that everybody was let out. Pretrial assessment prongs. The judges have to consider the nature and circumstances of the offense charge, the weight and evidence, and the defendant's criminal history. Whether or not the person is a danger to anybody in the community, and just the fact that the person is charged with a really horrible sounding crime like aggravated robbery, that alone cannot be used to keep a person incarcerated. And just to be clear, I think that the concept of bail reform is a commendable one. I don't believe that anybody should be languishing in jail pending trial if they are not a danger to the community. But what we have seen time and time again is that because of the way that the rule has been implemented, and frankly must be implemented by the courts, as a result, a number of individuals who go out and repeatedly reoffend, have been released. So now let's take a look at that upper part of this slide. It's solely the prosecutor's burden to prove by clear and convincing evidence that no release conditions. I focus your attention on that underlined word, no release conditions, will reasonably protect the safety of any other person or community. Think about it for a minute. That's a fairly impossible standard to meet, to say that no release conditions can be created such that the person has to be detained. Yet we still move forward and try to prove that every day. Now, of course, the court has standards, and it must apply non-monetary release conditions, and they do that fairly regularly. There's a court-issued pretrial services, which maintains the monitoring of ankle monitors and things of that nature. Data from 2022 in Doñana County show that 176 cases were created by the criminal conduct of 44 repeat offenders. So this matches up very well with the information that you have received by Deputy Chief Orenda, as well as Lieutenant Bradley, as far as crime statistics are concerned. This comes to where the crunch happens. Within 3 days, the prosecution has to file an expedited motion for pretrial detention and provide evidence. So essentially what we have to do whenever the police make an arrest is we have to gear up within that time period and collect together tangible evidence as well as affidavits from officers and or witnesses, subpoena these folks and have them in trial, in court, before the court, so that the court can assess whether or not there's clear and convincing evidence that this person should be held. That happens daily. This is the significant data, and I'd really like you to take a look at this. This is with regard to repeat offenders. In 2022, we filed pretrial detention motions, and 60% of those that we filed were denied. In other words, what we're saying here is that the district attorney's office believes that 60%, that of those 100% that we filed, all of them were dangerous and should have been detained. The court denied 60% of those, except for those that were withdrawn. In 2023, same statistical analysis, 72% of those which we asked the court to detain a person on were denied. 2024, 72% again denied. Now let's take a look at the turquoise down below. Year to date, 105, year to date, 105 pretrial detention motions have been filed. 35 of those 105 have been arrested again. So you can see it, you can read it. What I'm trying to get across is that the fact that a person is released on conditions of pretrial release does not guarantee that he's not going to reoffend. That's just a reality. This came to fruition, and the courts came under scrutiny, and the Court Rules Committee as well during the legislative session. Let me go back. Turquoise block, resulting in Senate Bill 271. What Senate Bill 271 does is that it requires that if a person is out on conditions of release for a felony, and they have been arrested on another felony, then the court is required, whereas before it was discretionary, it was whether or not we filed a motion or whatever, the court is required to hold a hearing to determine whether or not that person should be released. That is something that I believe that the legislature wisely took action on, and please note this. It did it during a very short 30-day legislative session. That's how seriously they took it. Usually these types of action, these types of bills are passed during the longer 60-day sessions, because the 30-day sessions are for budgetary issues. We have a continuing duty to ensure that our office is making sure that we can keep the public safe by filing pretrial detention motions, motions to review conditions of release, and keep those individuals who are dangerous away from citizens, because we've all heard the stories of individuals who have even committed murder, and then they've been put back out on the street because of these rules. Next is with regard to competency. Competency is exceptionally complicated, but competency is something that the criminal justice system encounters and we see quite frequently. Competency can be raised at any time by any party, the state, the defense, or the court. And what we're talking about here is whether or not a person is competent to stand trial. That's the only kind of competency that we're talking about. And it is very, very important because I have absolutely zero desire to prosecute someone who is not competent to stand trial. That's not what America's about. But what we find is two things. The competency rules generally result in no action and no vindication of the criminal conduct, and it delays the process. Let's take a look. Competency is raised. When competency is raised, everything in the criminal justice process stops. If it's opposed or not opposed, either way, the court is going to, excuse me, essentially end up ordering an evaluation for a forensic eval by a forensic psychologist or a forensic psychiatrist. And what we don't have is a lot of forensic psychologists or forensic psychiatrists. As you'll see during the remainder of my talk, what this goes into is the lack of services throughout the state of New Mexico for mental health issues. That is a very, very dire matter that really needs attention. The forensic expert will do a report. They'll come back to the court. The parties can argue about it. If the person is not competent, then the question is whether or not he is dangerous. That is a totally different dangerous standard than the one that I've talked about before concerning pretrial release. I'm going through this rather quickly, but I'm sorry, we're short on time. But anyway, if they are dangerous, then they're committed to Las Vegas to be treated back to competency. There's an entire battery of rules and standards associated with that. If they're not dangerous, then they are essentially dismissed, and the state, the DA's office, can consider whether or not the person should be sent to Las Vegas to some type of mental health treatment and or counseling under Section 43-1-1, correction, 43-1-10, and then we do that. But that only usually lasts for about 2 weeks to 30 days. So here we get to the heart of the matter, the case management rule. And what I want to show you is this. This is a report that was generated by the 2nd Judicial District Attorney's Office in 2017. There is a link to the website in that report. The 2nd Judicial District Attorney's Office was the first district in the state of New Mexico which had a case management order imposed. At the time that it was imposed, massive numbers of cases were dismissed, thousands, without regard to the justice accorded to the victims or not. When the case management rule in this district was imposed, I issued a letter to everybody who was a police officer or a victim in those cases that were dismissed, because over 550 cases were dismissed like that. We have since reviewed those cases to find out which ones we can move forward on. I'm glad to say that over 330 have been refiled. This is an ongoing thing. But you'll see there that there are a number of reasons why the court dismisses the cases. And these reasons are by Supreme Court order. This is not by my whim as the elected district attorney. If the defendant isn't transported for a hearing, case is gone. If the defendant is, if for whatever reason the calendaring doesn't comply with the case management rule, the case is dismissed. I'll give you an example. In this district, we can only hold arraignments once a week. On Mondays, only on Mondays. Well, depending on how the case is proceeding, it could fall into a situation in which you can't do the arraignment within the timelines given. If that happens, the case must, by action of law, be dismissed. When that happens, if it's dismissed once, okay, you can bring it back. But under our case management rule, if it's dismissed a second time, then it's dismissed with prejudice and you cannot bring it back. And that could be from an administrative procedure. Imagine if that's a rape or a murder. Now then there's discovery requirement violations. In years past, if there had been a discovery requirement violation, like for example, oh, state, you didn't give them a picture, Then the judge turns to the state and says, give them the picture. We give them the picture, we move on. Now, oh, state, you didn't give them the body cam video, you didn't give them a picture, you didn't give them a medical report, case dismissed. Oh, well, we have the officer. No, 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 no. Witness gets excluded too. Now, why is that happening? Our chief district judge has summarized it this way, that the mandate from the Supreme Court is nobody stays in jail and minimal dockets. Now, whenever we look at what is listed here in this report that was sent by the 2nd Judicial District to the New Mexico Legislature in 2017, you will find that it mirrors exactly everything that is happening in this district since the implementation of our own case management rule. That's why I say same playbook, same result. Look at Albuquerque before 2017. Consider Albuquerque now. We have a case management rule in this district, and we are fighting like mad to make sure that everybody in this room and everybody in this county is safe, just like the police do. And we will continue to do so. And now that I've delivered the bad news, what I'm going to do is try to share with you some of the better perspective on what it is that we're doing to try to address this. Because regardless of who is sitting in the chair of the district attorney, these rules are going to apply. So anybody can say whatever it is that they want to, whatever they're going to do, but they're going to apply. And why do I say that? Because they've also been implemented in other jurisdictions throughout the state. They've been implemented in the second, of course, in the 8th, in the 1st. And the word is that ultimately it is to go through statewide. That is what bail reform means. That is what bail reform has been. But here's the silver lining. What the objective is that nobody will be languishing in jail. Cases will be processed in a streamlined manner. Only those cases that have solid evidence and good, strong witnesses are going to be brought before juries so that the members of the community can make their decision and apply the law. And in order to do that, I can tell you that my office has taken the initiative to do something that no other district attorney's office in the state has done, and that is to purchase out of our own budget a software module that allows us to integrate with the electronic data discovery processes already in place by all law enforcement agencies in this district. It's called Prosecutor by Carpel. It is state-of-the-art, it is up to date, and it is not a dream. It's up and running right now. Compared to what we were using, CMS, Case Management System by AODA, that hadn't been updated since 1997. And all it was just basically a bucket for documents. You couldn't even store a video on it. Now, we get the body cam videos transmitted through the link through evidence.com straight to our PBK, and it's up and running, and our ADAs can facilitate the case that way. We're also at 89% fully staffed with regard to our attorneys, and we're doing that through making sure that they are well compensated, more than the average, plus bonuses. So I've explained some of the things that are affecting us, and this slide is to show you that there is order to it. Their cases are identified by tracks: simple, intermediate, and complex. Failure to comply, sanctions, I already touched on that. Extrajudicial statements. I wanted to share this with you because many people may not realize this. As prosecutors, we have an obligation to the defendant as well as to the public. We have to ensure that there's a fair process. We cannot say things that are going to potentially have an impact on the outcome of a pending litigation. That's why you might wonder, well, why is the DA's office saying something? Because I can't. Would I love to pound the podium and say what a bad guy somebody is? Yeah. Can I do it? No. Should I do it? Never. Why? Because justice demands fairness and not putting your thumb on the scale before a person has had their day in court. That's why we don't have pretrial publicity, and also professional rules of conduct. All lawyers, including defense attorneys, are obligated to do so. Primary function of a defense attorney is to get their client off. The primary function of a prosecutor is to ensure that justice is done. Justice can be done by a plea agreement or by a trial, but either way, we're working hard to do it, and I would echo one thing before I step away from the mic, and that is I am very, very pleased with the work that I have been able to do and see from Chief Story and Las Cruces Police Department. It is a breath of fresh air. We communicate with them very, very closely. I can tell you that firsthand that the chief has provided us a list of frequent flyers, and we noted, hey, chief, there's a problem with one of these cases. He got a hold of the officer. Within 20 minutes, we had everything we needed. That is teamwork, and that is a responsive police agency, and they are doing that hard work for you, each and every one of you, and they are to be commended for that, because we're just a cog in the wheel. But they're the ones who are out there, 0 dark 30, collecting the evidence, interviewing witnesses, doing all the heavy lifting, just for us show ponies later on in the courtroom, right? So I just wanted to say that's what we have to say about what our office is doing, how we are involved in the criminal justice system, and how we work closely with our police partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the kind words, sir. Thank you guys for bearing with me as well, and I keep forgetting that the big screen is down, so I apologize. I imagine most of you cannot read the slides very well, but it will be again on the YouTube page, so you can go back and look at the details. Now we're going to talk about what most of you are probably here for, or potentially, solicitation shopping cart ordinances that we will be discussing on Monday at the work session. Because I don't want to keep you here for another 2 hours, this is going to be a abbreviated, a summarized presentation of what's going to be on Monday. But again, we can talk a little bit more during the question and answer if there's questions specific to this. When we talk about the solicitation ordinances that we already have, the purpose, what we're trying to accomplish by updating them is really two things: remove potentially unconstitutional language and narrow the focus to a public safety interest. Those are the only two things we're really trying to accomplish right now with the update. The changes in both those ordinances are fairly minor overall. However, there could be still additional work that's done between now, the work session, and whenever they are brought to council for a vote. Of course, Monday there is no vote. It's only presentation and discussion about these. And the goal is for them to be enforceable in their entirety. I don't want sections that the officer can and can't enforce, because that's very difficult. That's a hard thing for me to ask the officers to do. Hopefully you can read it somewhat. I'm going to go over this. I'm going to read the ordinance for those that can't see it. I'm going to hit on a few high points, and then I'm going to move on to some other points. I'll spend more time on the shopping cart ordinance. But 2162, which is already in our ordinance, in our code, this is the updated version that we'll be presenting on Monday. It shall be unlawful for any person to solicit money or other things of value, or to solicit the sale of goods or services in the manner described in subparagraphs 1 through 3 of this section. Solicitation is prohibited as follows: in an aggressive manner in a public area or on private property within the city limits. On private property, if the owner, tenant, or lawful occupant has asked the person not to solicit on the property, or has posted a sign clearly indicating that solicitations are prohibited on the property. Or 3, from any occupant of a motor vehicle that is in traffic on a public street, if, and that's a big if, the solicitation would cause any person to walk upon a portion of the roadway not clearly designated and or marked for pedestrian foot traffic. Now, there's definitions that are in 21-61 that are important for context here that I'm not going to go over right now, but I will be going over some of those on Monday. A real key point when we talk about solicitation, I think a lot of the stories I hear and the anecdotes, and even within my own family, the problems we have are when people are trying to go to a gas station or to a store or to another business, and it's not somebody asking politely for money. That does happen. That's not the problem. It's not what we get complaints about generally. It's the person who is at your door before you can even open it, or follows the person even after they've told them no all the way into the store, prevents them from coming out of the store or in the store. or touches them and batters them, or does a number of other things with what they say to them or how they act. Those are the issues we're having. And there are others, but this is our primary focus right now. For those that have private property, whether you're a business, retail, or other business, know that in the ordinance already and with the update, you can post a no soliciting sign, and that allows officers to then at least have reasonable suspicion to make contact with that person if they have reason to believe that they are soliciting on the property. And so that's the first course of action that I would say that's available to private property owners or managers or designees. I'm going to shift to the shopping cart ordinance, which is, in my opinion, probably the one that's going to have more debate. Maybe I'm wrong. But shopping carts have been an issue. Now, it sounds minor, and even when it was brought to us, our community outreach officers back here, some of them were the first ones to one, see the problem, and two, try to bring a solution for it. And that was, well into last year, or probably even before that. It is an issue. And now, it may seem minor, but one, it connects to many other issues. And if you look at shopping carts, I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures today and even more on Monday. But even by itself, it's a significant problem in our city. Creates a public nuisance. The accumulation of these abandoned carts on public property is a hazard. We've had fires. We've had other issues with them. We've had them in traffic, which potentially can cause a crash, which can injure people. And so it's something that I feel like we need to deal with as a city and as a community. Ultimately, one of the things I see is that they affect the perception of the problem. We have a problem with homelessness, with addiction, with mental illness, and with crime in Las Cruces right now. But sometimes the perception of that problem is expanded, it's blown up by what we see. And I'll give an example, hopefully this will make more sense. But perception and reality are very important. The closer perception of the public is to reality, the better off we all are. Because if we're trying to offer solutions, whether that's the police, the public, we need to be working with the facts. And if our perception is way off base from the facts or reality, it's very difficult to have good, reasonable solutions that are going to actually have a positive effect. So here's what I'll ask, and so we're not disruptive. This is an encampment, this is in Las Cruces, with a show of fingers, preferably not toes. How many people do you think are occupying this encampment? For those that are willing, show me fingers. I got 4, 10, 7, okay, all over the map, good. The reality is this is one person. This is one person. And so here's my point, and you'll see there's several shopping carts here. You see one in the front, but there's some in the back. But when you drive by that, or when I drive by that even, because I would have thought the same thing, you're thinking, there's 8 to 10 people that are homeless in this encampment, when the reality is there's one. So it takes the perception, the problem, and it blows it up even bigger. And that's not good for anybody. That's not good for the people who are homeless. That's not good for the police. That's not good for those that are advocates or working, offering services to the homeless, the businesses. Nobody benefits from an inflated perception of the problem. I'm going to show you a series of photos fairly quickly. These are all taken here. I had to redact, obviously, the artwork on the wall there, if you can see it. All these cards were from one address, essentially. And that's just kind of a preview for Monday. But I was actually working a little bit, a couple hours last night on the streets. I went to a desert area, which is a small desert area between a residential and a retail area. And just walking in that area, I wasn't looking for shopping carts, but there's 2 shopping carts abandoned full of really what appeared to be trash in this area. I'm not even looking for it last night. This right here is an operation that was run in 2020, spearheaded by our community outreach section who's standing in the back, along with codes and other people that took part. And in 5 hours in 2020, they collected 152 carts valued based on the estimates given from each of the businesses of how much they pay for shopping carts at $50,395 in 5 hours. That was back in 2020. Now, other operations have been done in between these, but I'm giving you kind of one of the first ones and the one that was done this week to bookmark the issue. A couple days ago, they ran another operation. It only lasted 2 hours. They partnered with several other city departments and sections within the police department, and they collected 162 shopping carts in 2 hours, valued at approximately $32,180. And these are all abandoned. Most of them, though, are not necessarily just abandoned with empty. A lot of times they have a lot of trash and debris that goes with it, which also costs a lot of money for the city to clean up. Here's a summary of that project, and they keep very good records of where the carts went to. Obviously, Walmart is the majority. Shouldn't be a surprise to most people. But again, this is 2 hours of time with a lot of resources dedicated, but not that many either. So I'm going to summarize the ordinance. And it's already available on the agenda center in the packet for the work session if you want to read it in its entirety before Monday. But what are we trying to accomplish with the shopping cart ordinance? The first thing is there's kind of two parts, although it's all in one. There's the requirements of the businesses. Those retail businesses that offer shopping carts have to do a few things to help them prevent these thefts and reduce the problem. One is to affix a sign or placard to all the carts. That helps us identify where the cart is from, the specific store, a number for us or someone else to call to pick it up. They submit a shopping cart plan. Every 2 years it has to be approved by community development, or they can apply for an exemption. I'll give you a good example for an exemption. Save Mart, who's one of our smallest grocers in the city, already does something that would be qualify as an exemption. They have an attendant who walks every person out to their vehicle and they walk the cart back. So if this is passed, Save Mart will essentially, all they'll have to do is apply for their exemption every 2 years, but they'll have to change nothing with how they're actually operating. But if they don't have one of those exemptions, there's some other things that they have to do to help us help them. They also have to retrieve carts within 3 days when they're notified that they're abandoned. Some other things it does, it makes it, and it's already technically unlawful for all these things, but to remove a cart from the premise, to possess an off-site shopping cart, abandon an off-site cart, or alter, convert, or tamper with the cart or identifying signs. Now, all of these things are already illegal, either possession of stolen property, larceny, criminal damage to property would apply to these already, but it allows us to have a more holistic approach to dealing with this issue specifically. So why is this ordinance important? It does several things. One, like I mentioned, this is kind of a counter to some of the arguments. Theft is already a crime. And if we wanted to take enforcement action, if the focus was let's go take enforcement action, let's cite these people and let's get them in the criminal justice system, we could already do that under existing laws, if that was the focus and the sole focus. Another point is as soon as we justify and excuse any crime, we compromise the entire system. So, I've heard that this theft should be excused. But as soon as we justify that, we're basically saying that what if that person went onto your property, your carport, your open garage, and they took a garden cart and they used that to store their property? It's still stolen property, and we have to have accountability for the crimes that occur in our community. There are several businesses that have very few carts or no carts when customers go. Some of the dollar stores and others they don't have a huge inventory of carts. So when 3 or 4 get taken in a day, there's times where they have 0 carts available or 1. They have to go borrow from another store within the same, another Family Dollar or another Dollar General, which is, a negative for the customers and the residents of our city. And like I mentioned earlier, it makes a bad situation look even worse, which is not beneficial to anybody. Shopping carts contribute to blight and unhealthy conditions. I said we've had fires. There's generally a lot of trash and debris that's associated with the abandoned carts. And here's a point that I think is lost a lot of time. I'm going to show a video on Monday that really illustrates this, but when you have someone, well, first of all, let me back up. An effect that is often associated with schizophrenia and meth use or mental illness in general is hoarding behavior. And so we'll see often people with 4 carts, 5 carts, 15 carts, full of stuff. And a lot of times it's cardboard and trash. When I say trash, objectively trash. They'll take a trash bag from a trash can, and that's in the cart. And they're attached to this stuff, though. To them, it is property. But when they have 5 carts full of stuff with them, and you try to get them to go somewhere to get services, it makes it very difficult to actually get them, for them to be mobile and get plugged into services. It's like an anchor that ties them down to wherever they're at and slows them down from accessing things. If enforcement action is taken, which enforcement action generally is not the first course of action for most things, it's still ultimately an opportunity to plug them into services at municipal court through our SOS program. An important thing to note is for nonviolent misdemeanors, and this has been true for decades, people do not go to jail for nonviolent misdemeanors generally. They get a citation or a summons, The detention center does not take people for nonviolent misdemeanors unless there's exceptional circumstances. Nobody's going to jail for having a shopping cart. Now, depending on what they do during that interaction, a different crime could result in going to jail. But the act of having a shopping cart is not going to result in somebody going to jail, nor is solicitation. But if enforcement action is taken through a criminal citation or a summons, and they get plugged into municipal court, and I'll talk more about this program here in a second, it is an opportunity, hopefully, to get them treatment for whether it's substance use, mental illness, or both. And ultimately, something that can improve their life, but also improve the community at the same time. So I'm down to my last couple slides, I promise. I want to briefly overview this. Brad Douglas, our acting city attorney, talked about it for a few minutes last work session on Monday. But this is something that's very close to happening. Judge Velosa has already been doing what he can within the bounds of the rules to implement this. But it's really a partnership between a lot of different people. Services at this point will likely be provided by nonprofit organizations, whether that's treatment or other services. And there's a bunch of different things that would fall under that, if you can see from this list. The end goal is to be both a diversion and a post-conviction program. What that means is, let's say somebody gets cited for possession of a shopping cart off premise. A diversion would be if you engage in this treatment program and complete it, it comes back to the court, they dismiss the charge. If they don't, it has to come back to the court for prosecution, because otherwise the whole program would basically fall apart. Post-conviction, if someone is convicted of really any crime, and we're not just talking about the ordinances here. It could be shoplifting, it could be criminal damage to property. As a condition of that probation, we can plug them into services. And the compliance officers that they are either have hired or about to hire would monitor the progress for both the diversion and the post-conviction. They also have a new case manager who basically oversees everything and plugs them into where they need to go to best deal with their issues. And just as a side note for the city attorney's office, I'm excited. I believe that this is going to happen soon. I have a lot of confidence in Mr. Douglas. They're going to be adding two full-time prosecutors. And what that means is those people can then prosecute the criminal cases that officers are prosecuting themselves right now, and maybe eventually even the traffic cases. That means officers are on the streets doing what they're supposed to be doing with crime prevention and response a lot more often than being tied up in court. The purpose of one of these positions is to relieve officers from their time in the courtroom so they can be policing. A full-time public defender will basically be the other side of that equation. And then ankle monitoring services, we're looking at, it's in the budget that's being presented to council this year. One of the things we lack in Doña Ana County, is, especially for municipal court, is pretrial services. So when there's conditions of release, when someone's released, there's no one or any program to monitor whether they're actually following those conditions of release. The way the judge knows they're not is when they get arrested on another charge and he's back in the courtroom and obviously another charge violates their conditions of release. That's how he knows. So it's not like everybody who commits a petty misdemeanor is going to be on an ankle monitor. Now, when I talk about the people that have 141 arrests in municipal court alone, not including MAG and district court, in 3 years, those people are good candidates for ankle monitoring if they're on conditions of release. It also allows them to geofence areas. If someone's threatening a particular business or person, it will let the compliance officer know if they're entering that area, so we can help protect our victims better than we're doing right now. So I appreciate your patience as we talked about a lot of different things, and you probably couldn't read most of the slides as we talked, but I wanted to give this information because I think it's important. It all ties together, it all goes hand in hand, and really, in order to have a positive effect, we have to kind of address all these issues simultaneously. So at this time, we're going to do questions. I'll remind you that this town hall format is to be productive. So although we don't have a ton of time, we want to have that interaction. That's why I don't want to do the cards where you write them. But the amount of time we have and the amount of people we have, we want to be respectful of that and answer as many as we can in that time. So our PIO, Dan, will be going back and forth, trying to get the questions. He'll have you ask the question, and then you'll move on while we answer the question. If I could have my staff come forward to help answer any questions we have. Go ahead, Dan.
And real quick, if I may, I'm going to be holding the mic. We had a situation a year or so ago where somebody held a mic and spoke for about 2 minutes. We're trying to keep this simple. So if you would please keep it to your question only, and If you have commentary, you can either send us a message on Facebook, a direct message, or you can come in after this meeting and talk to one of the officers up here. And also, if we can we line up either on the edges or in the middle? And I'll take those questions first. Okay? Who's first?
And let me also say that at the end, obviously, we'll be here for a little bit, so we can have conversations afterwards as well.
And if you would, say your name first.
Vic Villalobos. I just have a question on Officer Randa's slideshow. It showed 2023 numbers, 2024 numbers. Is that all of 2023 compared to where we are in 24? Or is it 2023 through April today to?
That's a good question. It's January through March for both years.
Gotcha.
So,
That was my
first
question.
quarter for both years.
Thank you. And who's next? Let me hold it.
What's the police response time if I call 911 and somebody's breaking into my house?
Deputy Chief Udinda, he's asking for response time. So he knows the priority and non-priority. He could probably tell you a little bit more about some of the things we're doing to reduce that, but go ahead, sir.
Our response time has varied, but our response time has varied.
Come over here.
Our response time has varied lately. However, we have implemented several changes within our rosters for our patrol division to ensure that response time is continually improving. Most recent numbers for response times for non-priority calls were approximately just a little bit over 4 minutes. Response time for priority calls were just under 4 minutes. Response times for non-priority calls were roughly around the 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Which is actually a significant reduction compared to those that we had earlier this year. However, we're still implementing new changes within our patrol divisions to ensure that response time meets our goal to remain under 4 minutes for priority calls and under 8 minutes for non-priority calls.
And as a reminder, please state your name first before asking a question.
Hi, Renee Sanchez, and I'm here, well, for many, many reasons, but just off the top of my head, in addressing, the shopping cart issue and just solicitation, what is being done, or is there anything that can be done with all the panhandlers that are on every corner? Because I think that really contributes to the spread of the shopping carts everywhere and the trash everywhere, because they're allowed to be on every corner. And it's unsafe. I mean, we can't even, it's just, and I have my 2 kids with me all the time, and we just feel very unsafe.
I appreciate that question. And you're specifically talking about mostly on the roadways, right? Yeah. So that becomes a much more complicated issue than when we're talking about private property. So private property you don't have a First Amendment right to do a lot of things on private property. Roadways and sidewalks, or sidewalks specifically, are traditional public forums. So there's First Amendment protections in those areas. And so our goal is to find that balance. Now, that's what is attacked when a ordinance is challenged. It's going to be that part of the ordinance that's generally challenged. And so when I listed that third part of the 21-62, that's to address roadways, but there has to be that significant public interest, has to be narrowly tailored. The time and manner restrictions have to be set specifically to address specific public safety issues. And so that's what we're working towards, but we have to be very careful on how we do it. And if someone is on a sidewalk soliciting or panhandling, there's basically nothing that we can do about that. It's under certain conditions that we can restrict it.
Okay, next.
Al Pettis. So it was really neat to see the painting of, I don't know how many of you guys that remember Mayor Albert Johnson. So the only homeless person that I knew during the 70s was Solano Joe. That was the only guy that I knew, one guy. And so I have several commercial properties on Loman, and the stats, you need to adjust it at 2 to 3 times on the commercial crime, because we never report those, because nothing ever happens.
I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Can you correct those stats? And also, when you're doing the percentages, when the crimes are double, so that's a 100% increase, not a 50% increase.
On which one specifically?
Whichever of the ones that you put up there that it was 50%, but it was really 100%. So.
Okay. To address what you're saying, no, we can't adjust that, because if I adjusted it, that would be going against NIBR's and FBI reporting protocol. Now, I suggest if you have an issue to report it to us. It's not that we do nothing. I will say, and I'm gonna be honest, I get upset when people say our officers do nothing. They're out there 24/7 trying to protect this city. They sacrifice their family time, their mental health to protect this city. And when people say that, I don't know if they think officers just get in their car and they sit somewhere for 10 hours. That's not what happens. They're going call to call to call every day. The call volume is excessive here. When we get a case, we can't always do what we want to do, which is solve the case, find the bad guy, put him in jail, and let him be prosecuted or her be prosecuted. No, we can't always do that. But that is the goal. And although mistakes are made, officers don't always do the best job they can. Overall, that is their goal, and that's what they try to do every day.
My name is Ann Pierce. We've got a neighborhood with some problems, and you guys do show up a lot, and we very much appreciate it. But the other night, we had to call in because there was a man, and he was yelling for help. None of us knew if it was our neighbor, if it was one of the people on drugs, homeless, mental health. And the dispatch person, it took 4 calls, and I was one of the people that called. And she left me with the distinct impression that it was okay for this man, even though none of us knew who it was, to just be out there yelling for help, and that one of us should go out and see who he was. And this was about 1:30 in the morning. I don't appreciate that, and I wonder who I should be talking to about the training for dispatch people.
Our executive director, our interim executive director, Jennifer Gorham, has worked. Now, I will say that staffing levels at dispatch have been even worse than they are for us. And so they have been struggling. Now, that's changed in the last couple months. We have a new director, a new interim director at least, and they have some things in place to help reduce the times that happens. Obviously, they don't want someone to call and not have somebody answer, whether it's emergency or non-emergency. As far as that specific incident, you're welcome to talk to Jennifer Gorham about that specific incident to see if you can get some feedback on that.
Where do I find her?
The Mesilla Valley Regional Dispatch Authority. If you go to their website, or Google Mesilla Valley Regional Dispatch Authority, and there'll be contact information right there.
Thank you.
Chief Story, Donna Stryker. Thank you for tonight, by the way, I appreciate it. So I just want to verify one thing. If there's a crime and we don't report it, it's not in the stats, right?
Correct. And
So,
I just want to make one point. I'll let you finish, Donna. Deputy
Sure.
Chief Woodenda talked about the crime funnel. It's not just here. If you look at any jurisdiction, that's not just in the United States, that's New Zealand, Australia, the UK. About half of the crime that occurs is not reported. It does not become known to the police. That's not optimal, but that's true everywhere.
so the message is, everybody in this room who has something perpetrated against them, if there's a crime, you need to report it. If it didn't get reported, it didn't happen, and we need those in the stats. Thanks,
Yes.
Chief Story.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lisa Parrott, and I'm actually asking a question for a viewer online. She had a car stolen by a known gang who, it was her mother's car. It was given to her when her mother died and had personal belongings and was totaled. She was wondering what can be done to cut down on minors doing grand theft auto. Thank you.
Question, I don't know if anyone else wants to help me with this, but that's a complicated issue. Underlying conditions obviously would be the optimal solution, which is better family structure, more involvement from fathers. But we're dealing with trying to address the issues that are happening right now, the crime. If we want to prevent that from continuing, we have to deal with those underlying issues. The juveniles that are committing those crimes is what we focused on last year going into this year, with property crime specifically, or generally, and stolen vehicles specifically. And it had an effect. But I don't have a magic wand, because our juvenile system, when a kid gets arrested, or not arrested, when they get cited for stealing a vehicle, because most of the time they're not going to be detained, even for a violent felony, there's not a whole lot of incentive to not go steal another car. And so that makes it difficult to actually break that cycle of car after car being stolen by our juveniles. Yeah, something.
So to carry on with that, some of the other things that we've been working on, I think everybody here is well aware of the Kia and Hyundai issues. One of the things that we did through investigations with the police department is we reached out to Hyundai so that we could provide wheel locks. It was part of a settlement because they faultily made those vehicles. It was part of a settlement. We procured a lot of them to start giving them out to the community to help secure those vehicles. We work very closely with the district attorney's office with these juveniles committing these crimes so that we can identify them and try to get this adjudicated in the best way possible. But the unfortunate thing, like the chief said, is we don't have the ability to adjust a family structure. And that's where a lot of this starts.
Chief Story, my name is Michael Frames. I wanted to give my opinion. I feel that both of these ordinances that you're trying to push through is super important as a start in the right direction. Listen to some of the work sessions from City Council. It seems like they're starting to oppose the ordinances. I wanted to see what you would recommend for us as a public to try to get our council members to push these directives through to support you.
So two things. One, I would say let's give City Council an opportunity to actually hear it and then hopefully vote on it and not go off of any comments that have been made. Once the vote happens, if the result is not what you want or what I want, then you can be upset. Until then, I would say let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But if you have an opinion about it, make it known so that they have all the information about it, of where the public stands on these issues. So individuals, businesses, reach out, just let them know where you stand, whether you support it or not.
Yeah, Chief Story, Clayton Berryman. I just wanted to, I think I'm probably speaking on behalf of most people here when I say that I don't think Al was trying to say that our officers are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, as in keeping this community safe. It's obviously our policy that's in place that is not supporting y'all to help you to do what you need to do to keep us safe. We're so grateful for you guys, and you're doing a wonderful job, and thank you for doing this. That being said, is it public policy, is it local policy, or is it state policy? Where is it that we can help? I mean, if we need to show up at every city council meeting like this and push to help you, we'll do it. We need to figure it out. But these streets are getting less safe every day, and it's not your fault. You're doing everything you can, and we're grateful for you.
I appreciate that, sir. That's a very good question. The ordinances we're asking for are just tools. Are they going to radically shift the dynamic? Probably not. We're just trying to move the needle in the right direction. The biggest issues we're facing are at the state level. When the district attorney was talking about competency and bail reform, those are two huge ones. Competency issue alone, I have our list of people that I'd like to highlight, but I'll give you one. I have one person who was arrested 46 times in 2 years. 25 of those are felonies, including a couple batteries on a peace officer. Every single one of them, with a couple exceptions, which I'll explain in a second, was dismissed due to being found incompetent. That means there's zero consequences for all that crime. The ones that were not were either we made a mistake or somebody dropped the ball, but they're bookmarked by a case before and after where it was dismissed due to competency. So no matter what, all of them would have been dismissed. And when that's the result, he's not an outlier either. I mean, that one's pretty bad, but there's plenty right behind him. So when that's what's happening, it's very difficult to deal with these repeat offenders who are committing so much of the crime. We address that issue, and we address some of the issues with people violating their conditions of release, which Senate Bill 271 is hopefully a very good step in the right direction. That will make the biggest positive change that we can hope for, but that has to happen at the state level.
Thank you. My name is Marcy Dickerson, and I'm the owner of the Game Sports Bars, and I just have a huge compliment. We had a very violent person come into the game the other night and threaten my entire restaurant, and I will say we called 911. It was answered very quickly, and before we were off the phone with 911, we had a huge presence there from all of your officers. They did an amazing job. They had to take over 50 statements. They arrested the gentleman. And I just want to say that I know it's hard out there, but we really appreciate what you guys do. And you certainly give it all the time. So from the bottom of my heart, it made me feel a lot better to know how quickly you were there and how, you know, the concerns of my customers and what they did mattered. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Edward Howell, and I think you may have answered this just a minute ago in your talking about the state legislature being involved in the laws that you're able to use in the arrest and conviction of these folks. And so would it not be appropriate for the folks in this room to talk to their state legislators to make sure that these laws are passed so that you are armed with the correct amount of backup to take care of these repeat offenders who are just released back onto the street?
That's another good question. I would say yes. It's your guys' job to help me there. It's my job to reach out to them and try to give them as much of the facts and data as possible. But there's a special session coming up in July to hopefully address these issues. So now's a good time between now and July to really make your voices heard about what you want to see happen in this state to our state representatives and senators.
Hi, Bob Divin. Where do our stolen bikes go?
I have several people back there that can give a good answer. We have seen an increase in, if you look at those stats, when we break down those, the increase in felony thefts, for instance, some of it's retail theft, shoplifting, which is a huge problem, both misdemeanor and felony, but a lot of them are bicycles. A lot of our bikes are $500 or more, which makes it a felony. And so we've seen a huge spike this year in bicycle thefts. A lot of them end up in the encampments. We have the pictures just from the last couple of weeks of the projects they're working. There's spots with 10, 15, 20 bikes just piled on top of each other in those encampments. Does that summarize it pretty well? Okay.
Good afternoon, Chief. My name is Isaac Vigil, and approximately 12 months ago, the abandoned house across the street from mine over on Country Club Circle had been repeatedly broken into by a lot of homeless. It led me to install Google cameras on the exterior of my home, and I was able to surveil that property, and I was able to catch quite a few instances of people breaking in at all hours of the day, even like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. In fact, I can remember one time I was asleep on my couch taking a snoozer on a Sunday when my notifications were going off about it. The difficult question is there was approximately, from what I understand, 200 firearms that were stolen out of that house. Can you give any update as to the prosecution, recovery, any information on that case?
I'll just give this anecdote, including that last year, or the last 2 years, 22 and 23 had 568 firearms taken from houses and vehicles, stolen from houses and vehicles. A lot of those are from unlocked cars. So that was in the glove box, center console, or who knows, on the seat. So that's a huge issue overall, but those specific cases, that's not the only one where a house with a large number of firearms was burglarized and they were stolen.
So, sir, to speak more specifically to that, unfortunately, I don't have the exact details or numbers or any of it with me I didn't bring, but I do supervise the section, and what I can tell you is you kind of hit the nail on the head. There were a lot of people coming and going out of that residence. There were a lot of firearms taken out. We have recovered some of them. We have arrested people for possession of them, but we have nowhere near recovered all of them. We've started moving forward, trying to get all of these happenings, but unfortunately, we've worked with Metro Narcotics, we've worked with federal entities, and everyone we can think of that might be able to help us. And we have had some luck in recovery. We still continue to check pawn shops in areas such as that, but there are still a large amount that are outstanding.
And we have time probably for another 10 minutes of questions.
Me again, Renee Sanchez. I just wanted to say thank you for everything also. I have had to call the non-emergency a few times this past year, and I do get quick responses from you guys, as well as a text message letting me know that you guys are on the way, you've received the message. So it was just a quick thank you for your service to our community as well.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that.
Good evening. My name is Kim Schulmeister. I was just wondering, have you guys noticed that there's an increase in exploited juveniles to commit some of these crimes, or some of the, even the homeless or the mentally ill being taken advantage of in either trafficking situations or organized crime that's affecting this area? And what is the plan to do something with that, or have you guys already implemented some of those things?
That's also a complicated question, Lieutenant Bradley from Investigations.
So to touch on that, ma'am, It would be a lot easier and it would make things simpler if it wasn't children being exploited for this. And of course, there's always going to be bad influences that are influencing juveniles. What we have seen is, in my opinion, a lot more shocking though. What we've seen are these juveniles committing these crimes for their own benefit, of their own volition. We've worked with the district attorney's office to try even novel approaches. We've worked with our federal partners to get some of these individuals charged as adults in the federal system. And it's not because they're unfortunately being exploited or being taken advantage of. It's because they're choosing to commit these offenses themselves and they're profiting from it. They have, going back to what Chief Story was talking about with competency, a prime example is we've had one individual, he's a juvenile, he's been found incompetent. He gets released, he breaks in, he steals a gun, he shoots at random people, he does all sorts of violent things, he's arrested again, he's found incompetent. That pattern continued until we could finally get him charged federally. And then from that system, because it was outside of the New Mexico court system, that has changed what happens. So to more accurately answer your question, while it would be a benefit to say, yes, these children are being taken advantage of, and we could attack the source, we're finding it more and more that these juvenile offenders are committing these crimes of their own volition.
Good evening. I'd like to ask a question. What kind of...
I'm sorry, your name first?
Oh, Mike Deckman. How you do? What can a person or persons who are being harassed by the homeless trying to get into their place of employment do? And I mean the person being harassed and the employer. What can they do about it?
Well, on private property is easy because there are certain rights that the property owner or the designee has, and there are not the same protections on private property. So trespassing applies. If you have somebody that you do not want on your property, call us, we'll trespass them. If they come back, we'll arrest or cite them. And it sounds simple, sometimes it's not as simple as that, and sometimes we deal with the same person on the same property over and over, but that is the way we deal with that. And we'll have to continue doing it until something changes.
Could I speak with you right after this meeting concerning a specific?
Sure.
Okay.
Dolores Lucero. Chief, if the primary area at Albertsons on Loman and Starbucks, that is not a city road or a city sidewalk where those people panhandle. If those two businesses were to post a no trespassing sign and no soliciting, could you then remove them from that corner?
Yes, as long as it's not, we're talking the sidewalk, but as an example, these officers specifically back here, the area of Sprouts owns most of that complex or area right there at Loman and Walton. And Sprouts has put up no soliciting signs and no trespassing. And that has allowed us to make it a much safer environment for those that are shopping at Best Buy, Sprouts, et cetera. So the same thing can be done on any private property. As long it's up to the businesses though, because they're the ones who have to do it.
Hi, my name is Emily Garcia. I own a food truck here in town. And kind of speaking on the note of private property, with a food truck, of course, we don't own the property where we sell at. Typically it's a parking lot somewhere where we don't own the property. What would you suggest for us in that situation where we're approached by a homeless person or someone trying to solicit and they cause issue for our customer or ourselves where we feel the need to protect ourselves?
So that's a good question. Now, depending if it's private property, if you can go communicate with the property owner, the manager, whoever that person that's responsible for, they can do the same thing with trespassing that person if they're causing issues, or the no soliciting. On another note, under the solicitation ordinance, the current one and the one that we're trying to amend, aggressive panhandling is prohibited. Now, aggressive is defined by a number of things. So if the behavior meets the definition of aggressive panhandling, again, we're not talking about people who are politely asking for money or doing it in a non-aggressive way. That's a separate matter. So if it's aggressive, it might fit the definition of that, and it could be enforced under the solicitation ordinance.
Do we have any other questions? Here, come on up.
Shauna Pfeiffer. In January, you presented some very interesting slides that show basically your frequent flyers that use 999 West Amador as their address. What are the statistics, the newest statistics related to both the people that use that address as their address and the number of calls that you get to that address?
I don't have it off the top of my head, so I can't give it. I can tell you that's something we can track, but I don't have it right now.
Is it one of your hotspots?
Do we respond to 999 West Amador a lot? Yes, a lot is based on what that number is, but it's a frequent place we respond to, yes.
Understood, thank you.
My name is Fred Huff, and the question that I was hoping to hear answered tonight was, you can't be everywhere. What can we as citizens, what rights do we have to protect ourselves against these aggressive or threatening people that may approach us?
Well, again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to give legal advice, but what I can say in the state of New Mexico, you do have a right to self-defense. It's all based on reasonableness, just like it is for a police officer. So if someone spits at you and you pull out a firearm and shoot them, it's probably going to be found unreasonable, and it's going to be a crime. That's an extreme, so it depends on what the threat is and how you respond to the threat. But people have an absolute right to self-defense, to protect themselves.
My thought is pepper spray or something like that, is that considered reasonable?
It depends on the circumstances. I wish it was that black and white, and when I train officers, do the same thing. There's not a if this, then that, because every variable matters. The time of day, the location, the size of the person, the size of the officer, the size of the citizen. You have to look at all the totality of the circumstances, every variable, and then weigh out whether it's reasonable or not. So can pepper spray be reasonable? 100%, depends on the circumstances though.
Thank you. And I think that's all. Thank you, everybody. One thing I'd like to say, Chief, as I'm coming back down is, and it was mentioned earlier, and he was asking what people can do to help protect themselves. Ring or Nest or other Google doorbell cameras, cameras around your businesses, cameras at your homes, on the sides of your homes, all those things help out. Chief?
Again, I just want to thank everybody for being here. It shows your commitment to your community. We cannot do it alone. We have to do this as a community. Whether we're not going to agree on everything. We don't even agree amongst ourselves on everything. That's the way life works. But we have to be as united as we can be in the things that matter. And you all showing up here tonight is a good first step. We'll stick around for at least the next 10, 15 minutes. These gentlemen, these officers in the back are on the front lines. They're a great resource to talk to, but we'll be up here as well. Thank you.